It feels like in the youth ministry space, we're behind.
Yeah.
And we need to catch up, and we need to sit down and have a conversation about what it looks like to minister the best news on the planet to students with special needs, to students who are neurodiverse, and make sure that we are reaching all the students that we've been and families that we've been entrusted with.
You know better than anyone else that culture is changing.
Youth ministry is complicated, and doing it by yourself is really challenging. So
Let's rethink it together. Sound like a game day.
Welcome to the Rethinking Youth Ministry Podcast.
That was exactly like I imagined. Welcome back to the Rethinking Youth Ministry Podcast. My name is Ashley, and I am so excited to be having a conversation today about rethinking neurodiversity in youth ministry. And we have a great group of people in here today. I can't wait for you to meet them. I'm going to throw it to my left. First and foremost, in this conversation, we have the one, the only, the best Ashley in the world.
Game's Ashley up. Johnson.
That's right. She's number one.
I'm Ashley Johnson. I am a creative director and producer for Life Stage Resources here at Orange in Atlanta. And I am so excited about this conversation.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Hey, my name is Jeremey, and I am a student Orange specialist here at Orange here in Atlanta. And I'm really excited about learning from these people here, as well as just as a parent that has a child that is neurodiverse. And so.
Cool. We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
My name is Jess Berryhill, and I'm from Terre Haute, Indiana, and serve a church where we started a special needs ministry out of our student ministry. And so I've been doing that for several years, and has really just changed the face of our church and the face of our community. And so it's been really a wild ride, but a good one. And this conversation, I think, is one that we've just not had in youth ministry. And so anytime I get to talk about it, I get excited because it's so important and it can change the game in so many ways.
I agree.
Yeah.
Jess, we're so excited to have you here. I know at Orange, we're talking all the time about this conversation about neurodiversity, and I don't know anybody who has been innovating and leading in this space more than you.
So true.
And so when we were going to record this, we all agree. We're like, Jess Berryhill needs to be in the room because we all need to be challenged and we all need to learn from her. So if you are not following what she's doing, you need to be. Make sure you find her on social media. We'll drop that in the show notes. But hold on to your chairs because she's about to challenge the heck out of you and us.
And if you haven't said it, thank you for everything that you're doing for the church and just for youth ministry as a whole. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, to open the conversation, I feel like with a title about neurodiversity, I would imagine that might be a new term for people, or they may have heard it but don't quite understand what it means.
Yeah.
So I feel like just to get us all on the same page, Jess, would you mind unpacking what do we mean by neurodiversity?
Yeah, it's kind of, if you just look at the root words, it's the diversity in the way that people think. Like that is the basics of it. And so all sorts of people think differently, and there happen to be, some folks who may think what feels like is radically different, but it is kind of this broad kind of definition of normal. And so then when we're talking about what it looks like to be neurotypical versus neurodiverse, it just means that your brain thinks a little differently. And so that can look like a lot of different things. I mean, that can look like ADHD or autism, but it also looks like learning disabilities. When we talk about dyslexia, like that's just a way that your brain thinks differently.
Yeah.
And so I like that term in terms of, I think it offers a degree of, like, this is not a bad thing. Like, it's not a value judgment.
Yeah.
And so I think that's good. I do want to say that there are some things some disabilities that may not fall underneath the umbrella of neurodiverse, such as like cerebral palsy and so I think it's important to recognize the difference between a neurodiverse brain and then maybe a disability that maybe would fall underneath that umbrella.
Yeah, have other special needs.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really good. So what I hear you saying is someone who would be considered neurotypical would be a majority of how people would think.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that the right way to say that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if it's
No,
not.
I think that's the way that, most people think. But again, no value judgments on that.
Yeah.
And someone who's neurodivergent has a different way of processing information and learning and interacting with people. And then neurodiversity represents both of those ways.
Yeah.
And it's just saying like, we all think differently, which we already know, like we learn differently, we communicate differently. I love the positive nature of the phrase neurodiversity or the word neurodiversity. And I think it's an important part of the conversation, especially when it comes to youth ministry, because I will be the first to say, I think we've ignored it for too long. And I think there just aren't a lot of resources out there. And it seems like people really care about this when it becomes personal to them. And I don't mean that, as shade at all, but it feels like in the youth ministry space, we're behind.
Yeah.
And we need to catch up, and we need to sit down and have a conversation about what it looks like to minister the best news on the planet to students with special needs, to students who are neurodiverse, and make sure that we are reaching all the students that we've been and families that we've been entrusted with.
That's so good, especially just the vigilance that youth ministry and the strides that we're taking in the mental health space. Everyone cares deeply about it. We're trying to be sensitive and compassionate. I am so looking forward to just the education around neurodiversity and us amping up and revving up our urgency and willingness to dive in, you know?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people I've talked to, it can be overwhelming to even engage in the conversation because most people listening are already tired. They're already maxed. They don't have more budget. They don't have more people. They don't have more time, and they don't have more space. So bringing a topic like an important topic like this to the table, saying, "Yeah, but this is so important. It needs all of that."
Right.
Yeah.
It can be tempting to just turn this episode off. And be like, I'll listen later. But my challenge to everybody listening is to dig in, pull a seat up, because I don't know of a more important conversation, and I don't know of a more passionate person to be hearing from than you, Jess. So I'm so excited you're here to teach us what you've been learning.
It does surprise me though, because in most church culture, youth ministry is leading the charge in things that that are being innovated and things that are changing culturally. And this seems to be one area where I don't know if it's just that we've avoided it because it's hard, or if it's just something that we've not taken the time to actually learn about and to grow in. And so it just surprises me that we haven't tapped into this space yet.
Yeah.
You heard him. It's a challenge. Let's do this, y'all. Let's win in this space. We can only do this together. So let me open the floor with why are we having this conversation? Like, what have you been rethinking, or where have you felt challenged when it comes to this topic?
Okay, everybody's eyes are going up in their heads. I'm like, who's jumping in first? I think for me, I'm always thinking about the benefits of creative arts, just studying on the benefits of music therapy and how that is helping so much in the mental health space and also this neurodivergent space as well. It's a healing agent. And yet sometimes I think when we come to church, the way we experience music may not be as healing as it could be, or as influential in a way that really impacts everyone in a way that music can. Sometimes music only feels like it lands in one way or another. And so I've really been interested in rethinking what our worship experience looks like, thinking through the lens of including everyone.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's good.
I love that. That's so good. Jeremy, what about you?
I think one of the biggest things that I'm rethinking a lot is more so of as a young Black youth pastor, it's already on my mind of having a good representation in the room for students and trying to make sure that everyone feels included in things. But just by my own acknowledgement, I haven't thought about all of our students And that not only hurts me as a leader and as a pastor, but also as a parent of a child with special needs. And so just thinking about who needs to be in the room with us, not necessarily to just be like a buddy, but who needs to be in the room with us to help train myself, my volunteers, our student leaders, as well as any other parents that want to know more. So just who needs to be in the room with us.
I love that. I think something I've been rethinking, kind of jumping off that, Jeremey, is just like the more I'm learning about this, and I know like having degrees in education, we do a lot of conversations about like the laws and strategies to, honor an IEP or a 504. And I feel like I know how hard it is. I remember having a classroom of 43 students in the public schools, and I had 6 IEPs and 8 504s in one classroom, and I was the only adult.
Wow.
And I mean, it's so hard. And like, scale that to whatever size your ministry is. And I think that, the medical field is getting better at helping people figure out how their brains work and how they think and how they communicate. So we're seeing more diagnosis and more clarity around that. So I would imagine it's just, you're going to have more neurodiversity than ever before in your ministry. And I feel like, one of the churches I served at had a thriving special needs ministry, which is amazing. And I feel like I didn't always appreciate it the way I should have. I don't think I quite understood like the impact it was having on the families. And I feel like I wish I could go back in time, and really leverage that opportunity to have worked at a church with that and like thriving ministry and like learned from them and done a better job integrating and a better job including. So I feel like for me, I'm like, like you were saying, like what volunteer do I need in my life, in my ministry, who when I think I'm done with the planning or I'm ready for the program, they're going, wait, one step further. And then I'm also rethinking like, why is it that we always are thinking about our students that have special needs? Why are we thinking about them last? Like how would it change what we're doing if we think about students that have special needs first?
There it is.
Like what would that look like? Jess, what about you? What are you rethinking?
I think my catchphrase this year has been, it's really not that deep. Because at the end of the day, what we've realized is that at the heart of all of our friends with special needs, I don't want to cry. I'm already going to cry. Is community. Like that's what they desire most. And that's what we've heard when we've talked to people about the needs in our community. We've heard, I remember so clearly having a conversation with a partner and they said, if like we wanted to go out and have a girls' night, we could do that. But our friends never get that chance. And like that turned the way that we did our programming upside down. I was like, why are we doing these complicated things when people just want to have dinner together? Like, and sitting across from a friend who is 23 and she uses a wheelchair and she said, this is the first time I've ever had dinner without my parents. And you're like, oh my gosh, like we're missing it. And so this year I just have really been pondering the fact that maybe it's just not that deep. I think students show up in our spaces all the time and they crave community. And that's the same. That's the same thing that our students who are neurodiverse, who have disabilities, that's the same thing they crave. And so maybe it's just not that deep. And I recognize, and I don't want to downplay the hurdles because there are hurdles and there are things. But when we recognize the why and like it changes, like I think when volunteers catch that, it is like a game changer. And when they see that like it really is like maybe this is their only chance at community, then like it creates an urgency, I think.
I love that. Tell us a little bit more about the structure of the ministries you lead. Like you have a unique opportunity to lead multiple ministries at your church. Tell us about that and then how they intersect and all that?
Yeah, so our special needs ministry started really out of our student ministry. So early on, we had a student. His name is Nick. He's 23, 24 now, and so he's kind of grown up in our ministry. And we just weren't sure how to make him a part of our space and to really reach him the way that Nick needed to be reached. And so we started kind of this small group alongside our other small groups. So we would all meet for dinner, meet for worship, and then break off and kind of do our small group time. And so we had essentially a disability friendly small group. And so they hung out together, and that was great. And that's it. That's as far as we thought it was going to go. And then some other opportunities came up to kind of make it bigger and reach more, of our friends. And that's what happened. And it kind of blew up, and we didn't realize. And so now our special needs ministry is bigger than our student ministry. And there's crossover. So we do something called reverse inclusion, and we have some students who have crossed over into our student ministry as well. But it's been really cool to watch our students serve our students. They're all of our students. So yeah, it's incredible. And the things that our students have gained from that, our neurotypical students, has been it's a game changer. Like it cements faith in a way that I've never seen anything else cement faith.
Tell me a little bit more, unpack the reverse inclusion idea.
Yeah. So the idea is essentially that kind of everyone gets what they need. So a good chunk so we're not a big church. A good chunk of our students, though, come on Tuesday nights to hang out with our special needs ministry. And so probably 10 of them come and hang out with us. So that's, a good chunk of our crew. And so we get to do things that make sense for our friends with disabilities. So that might be, we do kind of our small groups in the first hour, and then maybe we do a crockpot club in the second hour. And so we kind of hit all of the needs, but then in our youth group time, we're still able to do the things, but also like if there's crossover, then that's great. Like that's what we want. But it's kind of become more of a community ministry. So it's got a weird vibe. I
love it.
It's not straight inclusion, but obviously our friends are a part of whatever they want to be a part of.
Yeah.
So.
That's great.
Yeah.
So how do you see your special needs ministry changing the way that you're doing youth ministry? Or how has it evolved over time?
Yeah. So I think it's made me more intentional to plug in those community building times in student ministry. So one of the things we do is like Milkshake Monday. And that came directly from our time when we do something during the summer in special needs ministry called home groups, where people come over to my house and we have dinner together, because we realized that these students weren't getting invited to people's houses. And so why would we not do that? Like, they're our friends, like they're people that we love, like let's invite them into our spaces. And so I think realizing that community building times are important to plug into my regular schedule, regardless of the ministry. And I think that's changed. It's made me more focused on relationships than it has ministry, ministry programming.
How have your neurotypical students embraced it? Like, what has that journey been like?
It's been, this is where I think I'm probably going to cry.
Cry.
It's been, man.
Let it out.
It is.
Let us see that passion that's boiling out of you.
It is. They are great. They are the best advocates. I would have a whole crew of middle school and high school kids. I would sign them all up, man. They are the best. They know how to just lean in. They're way better at it than I am. There's moments where I think I still feel a little awkward and I'm not really sure what to do, but then they show up and it's just like they bring the life to the party, and they just embrace it, and they're just way better at it than what an incredible way to elevate a generation who is already doing cool things. And just to say, man, you do this so well, let's champion this. And I have a youth group of maybe 30, and probably pretty much all of them have served in some way over the last year in special needs ministry. And so, and then granted, like I'm the advocate, like I'm like, hey, like you should do this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
But watching them become advocates is such an incredible thing. Like they just do it so well.
Yeah. I love that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What did it look like equipping those students to do that? And can you share a little bit about how long, not necessarily a timeline, but how long it took? Because I think most youth pastors, I know I'm guilty of this myself, we want a quick fix on things, and this isn't a quick fix. So how long did it take for you, and what did that look like equipping your students to do that?
I think you have to be in it for the long haul for sure. I think that's been definitely, so I have a ninth grader who started with us in sixth grade. Like her first experience was going to camp with us. And that's not typically how you break in new volunteers, but she was like, I'll go. And I was like, that's right. It's going to be a good time. And so now she is probably one of my best volunteers. Like she's incredible. Like she knows when situations get sticky. Like she would be one that I'd be like, hey, can you go handle that? Like, cause she's phenomenal. But then I think about my first class that Nick grew up with. Those guys have turned into fierce advocates. They are, I mean, they've been doing it since sixth grade and they're 23 now. Like, you know, they've been in it for 12 years and they serve, you know, they've decided to during college, have employment, working one-on-one with people with disabilities. Like it's become part of their identity and they can't, and I think they would say, I can't imagine my life without these folks. Like, and so it's a process, but it's one that is so easy to invite these students in and then they embrace it. Yeah.
I'm curious. First of all, it's so inspiring that what your special needs ministry started out of one student in your youth ministry that you saw that you wanted to meet the need and you wanted to figure it out. Like that says so much about you and your character and your leadership. Like I'm amazed by you. But I'm so curious, like as both your youth ministry and special needs ministry have grown, how has it impacted the community? How have they embraced it?
I think, so my goal, I think not initially, obviously, my initial goal was just to get through it and like just try to figure it out and try to get, you know, I don't think for me, like I don't want to say the best motives, but like, I don't think they were bad motives. I think I was just trying to fix a problem.
Got it.
And I was like, like this needs to be fixed. Like I need to figure Nick out. Like I need to, and instead of just deciding to do life with Nick, I was trying to just make it be better. And so I think later on, my goal was to become like the church in our town that's known for this. Like that's what we want to be known for. And how we embrace our friends with disabilities, like that can be part of our identity.
Yeah.
But then I think even more so, I think I have decided now that that's a great goal, but I want my goal to be that my town, my city, my region is more accessible for my friends because they're with me 2 hours a week, but they live in Terre Haute, where I live every day of their lives. And so if I can make this space better for them, then I want to show up and I want to push forward. And so if that means having a conversation with the bike park on how to make it more accessible so that my friends can get outdoors and have better mental health, then I'm going to have a conversation with them. I'm going to advocate in the same ways that I would for my neurotypical students. I want the city to be great for them too. So I think there's just been, I don't know, it's opened my eyes in ways that I just would have never expected.
That's incredible.
I have a question going back to what we were talking about with your neurotypical middle schoolers and high schoolers helping to volunteer. But what does it look like and what's the mindset, your goals? Do you ever look at your neurodivergent students and say, oh, I think they've got a knack for this? What would it look like to mobilize them to volunteer or serve? And what does that process look like to where they're getting that community, but they're also getting like fortified if they're showing interest in things and knowing that they can be trusted with responsibilities and growing in mentorship or just any of that? What does that look like in your ministry?
Yeah, you look across the board and you say, man, like every person desires purpose.
Yes.
And so let's find a purpose. Like, let's find you purpose. So whether that's, we've had some folks greet at the door. We've had them serve communion. We've, done those kind of things, but also we have a crew that comes in every Thursday and helps with things at church. And sometimes we do service projects outside of church. And so finding unique purposes for every person, I think, is going to help them feel more connected and feel that they do have a purpose. I mean, I think that purpose is the next step after you get community and after you know Jesus. Like, let's find purpose for you, or even before, whatever. But yeah, I don't know what's been your experience, I guess, of like equipping students and seeing like those unique interests. Sometimes it's hard to, how do we do that? What does that look like? Or what does that look like for you guys?
I know for me personally, my son, who is 10 years old, I hate to even say this as a dad. Immediately I thought that he couldn't handle certain things and that it was just over his head. But I miss the fact that my son is in the world of youth ministry with me every single day. And so out of nowhere, this passion to learn how to run the computer in our student center just popped up out of nowhere. And my son just said, "Hey, can I do it?" And he's running ProPresenter and starting games and stuff. And our kids director at our church that I was at, she recognized that and then started letting him run all the media for their kids ministry. And I have a picture of my son on my phone of him at the booth in the back of their kids ministry running everything. But then she also sent me a video of him worshiping while he's back there. And it's just one of the powerful reminders of the purpose that can be seen and should be seen. And so
I love that story.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Well, and imagine like families walking into your church and seeing that and seeing representation. I think representation, as we talk about purpose, like we want our folks to be seen. Like for so long, I think they've gone unseen. Yeah. And so for them to be on stage, for them to serve communion, like, I don't know what your theological beliefs on that are, but for us, like that was important. Yeah. And that showing up and being seen, I think, is huge.
I love that. I love the idea of not just keeping students who have special needs separate from everyone, but including them in the church body, because as much as they need resources specific to their unique needs, the church body needs their gifting and needs their presence, and it's an equal playing field in that. And I think that we could afford to see more of that, especially in our youth ministry space, for sure. Hey, Ashley from the Rethinking Youth Ministry Podcast here. I wanted to personally invite you to join us for Orange Tour this fall at a city near you. If you've never been to Orange Tour, what you need to know is it's a one-day training for you, but not just for you, it's for your entire team. So bring your volunteers, bring your coworkers, bring your mom, whoever it is. Come, and we hope that it is a day full of inspiration, and it's a day set aside for you to work on your ministry, not just in your ministry, because we know you do a lot. And the good news for you is I got a discount for you. Yes, I do. 20% off for you and anybody that you register. Use the code RYM20 at orangetour.org, RYM20, and you'll get 20% off all of your tickets. Boom! I hope you have the best time ever. Hey, Jess, I noticed that as you've been talking, you've used the term friends. Yeah. I noticed it's been intentional. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with that word?
Yeah. So there's a really good resource. I think we're going to peg it on the end of this, but it's called 5 Stages of Changing Attitudes. And so it talks about how we move from ignorance to acceptance, and then all the way up to, friends. But then the next level is co-laborers, that we believe we're co-laborers in Christ, and that our friends with disabilities are also co-laborers in Christ. And when I say friends, it's not a token word. It's not something like, oh, this is a special word that I use for, these folks. That's not that at all. It's that, like, I've built a relationship with these guys. Like, these are my people. Like, these are, like, I can't imagine life without them. Like, they are my friends. Like, they hang out at my house. Like, we do the things. And so it makes sense when you're in it to just, they're just people I love. So
I love that. That's beautiful. I'm curious how each of you have equipped volunteers in your ministries to not just show up for students who have special needs, but to catch the vision. Like, what's that journey been like in ministries that you've led?
I am going to be honest here, and I might even be speaking for other youth pastors, is that I have 0% experience with that.
Yeah.
And that is just full transparency. Is what it has looked like is, if there is a special needs student that comes to our ministry, we love on them, we dote on them even, but I cannot say there is a model put in place for discipling them, for long-lasting friendship. And those volunteers are either not that they're unwilling, it's just they're not there, they don't know, or they're hesitant, they're afraid. I have been in that category too. Like, what do I do? How do I show up? Am I going to be good at it? Am I going to be frustrated? Am I going to frustrate them? Am I going to get fresh? All of the things. And then you just cancel yourself out. And so really, to answer your question, is I have not had any experience with it yet.
Thanks for being honest with that. I'm sure you're not the only one. So I think that was brave and bold, and somebody is amening exactly what you just said. What about you, Jeremy?
That's the typical response, is that when families show up and when students show up, we say, well, we're just not trained in this, but we're also not paying attention to when we say that, how that affects that family. We're essentially saying, hey, we haven't thought about you showing up here. And that can be damaging. And so I think as leaders, and I myself am in the same boat. That was something that I said a number of times of, hey, I'm just not trained in this. But I think one of the things what we can do as leaders is begin to think outside of just the typical church training and going to find other organizations to help us better understand how to be equipped for families that show up. And again, just finding other maybe even bringing in families and asking them, hey, can you help train us so that we know what we need to be aware of in regards to what we need to say, what we need to do, what we need to provide. Those are just some things that I think we could possibly do.
Good. Yeah. I know for me, the one of the first churches I worked at had a thriving special needs ministry called Hugs. Shout out Sandy McCain. And she was amazing. She had a huge group of volunteers, which is why the ministry was so big. It was, our church was known for it in the community. But for us in youth ministry, we wouldn't be recruiting volunteers to work with our students that had special needs. The special needs ministry would recruit volunteers and then send those volunteers with the students to our ministry, which is kind of how it worked. Okay. And I remember some of the things that I would try to navigate was they were trained for the student that had special needs, but not for youth ministry. So it was the opposite problem.
Yeah.
And so it was conversations I'd have with Sandy. Gosh, she's amazing. She's a saint. It would be conversations okay, so I know that the Hugs volunteers all wear these red shirts. And that's what happens all the way through children's ministry. Do you think it changes when they get to youth ministry? Do you think maybe they couldn't wear the red shirt when they come to middle school? Because I feel if we really want them to feel part of it, it makes them stand out. If they have this adult with a red shirt on that says they're basically a volunteer for special needs. Yeah. I'm I don't know, and she was amazing. And she was it can change as they get older. So like trying to navigate, like, what does that look like in the middle school space? What does that look like in the high school space? And I know another conversation that would happen is because sometimes like the volunteers it was like, a young 7th grade young girl, and then the volunteer who came, who was equipped to meet her needs, was an older male. And when you have small groups, and we would have our small group time, and it's like no other girl in that group wants this older man sitting in a circle. And so I felt that tension a lot in my ministry. Is like, how do I tell him, not that I don't want him there, but can you not sit right next to her in a small group of girls? Or can we make sure that we're keeping that a safe space for everyone else while our goal is inclusion in this? Like, how do we still get her the help she needs, but also protect that time for the girls in the group? And so it's interesting, like talking about recruiting volunteers and casting the vision for our friends with special needs. But it was like an opposite thing for us, was how do we make this work? Because they're equipped, they have the vision, they show up more consistently than any volunteer in the church. Like they're amazing. And like, how do we make sure that we're intentional about what that looks like? Because it changes as they go through the school system too, the public schools. Like the help that they receive, the accommodations they receive changes as they get older, whether it should or shouldn't. I'm just saying, like, it should be a conversation that happens in the church as well.
Were the volunteers that you're referencing, were they primarily parents that were doing the recruiting, or was it just other adults in the church?
Other adults in the church, or young adults in the church, or students. They had an amazing volunteer team. So it was never that we didn't have enough volunteers. It was just like getting our ministries, and which I now realize was like totally my fault, because I should have had more conversations with their ministry leader to figure out like how to bridge that. I just, I wasn't experienced enough to know to seek that out. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jess?
I mean, I think you can talk about the needs. I think you can inform people about, what this student needs. We can talk about, information about I mean, there's plenty of information. And Jeremy, you made a good point. Like, there are tons of organizations who you can go to, and they will willingly come and talk to your volunteers. I don't think it's a lack of information. I think it's a lack of realizing why this is going to matter in the end and why it's worth it. And so that's what I focus on with my volunteers. Talk about, why is this going to matter? Why does this, and sometimes we'll use this, kind of some concentric circles where we'll write, my core group of people and then acquaintances, or friends and acquaintances. And we talk about what a neurotypical student's circles look like versus someone who is neurodivergent. What do those circles look like? Well, I mean, we know what teenagers' circles look like. They have friends, like those are priorities. On the other side, you have people who get paid to hang out with you. Like, that sucks. Like, the lack of authentic relationships, like that just sucks. Like, it's unfortunate. And so the church has an opportunity to fill in those gaps, to provide authentic relationships. And my volunteers, when I do that exercise, it's eye-opening, because you just don't realize, like, you never realize how important the church can be in that picture. Like, we get to be friends, like we get to be in the circles, some of the inner circles, like that's incredible. What a responsibility. But again, it's really not that deep either. So I don't know. I think really, really helping them obviously understand the needs, but also understanding the why and the impact that it's going to make.
I love that. And I feel like I'm sitting here thinking, a lot of times we approach neurodivergent students or students who have special needs with a mindset of, what do they need in order to thrive or interact, versus what do they already have to offer that will elevate them, mobilize them, make them feel purpose and connection. And so it's like, I just had that thought come to me as I was listening to you talk, just like a little bit of a shift of, do we treat students who have special needs as equals, as someone who has something amazing to offer, Or do we treat them like a problem that we have to figure out how to make it work?
Yeah.
Or the pity.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's one of the stages that hearing you talk about friends with such dignity is making me so emotional, because I'm like, of course, we are humans and we are, you know, children of God that need to be loved. But there is just this level of, it's kind of irresistible if you see someone of any diversity sometimes when you're like, oh, I just want to, and not realizing that for those of you who couldn't see my facial expression, just that pity thing, that I want to help. And it maybe even it comes from a compassionate place, but is that taking away, stripping some of their dignity, you know?
And I would just encourage you, wherever you are on those stages, that it's a journey. God is going to mold and shape our opinions and attitudes and change our hearts, like right before our eyes. If you decide to go all in on this, maybe not even all in, maybe you just decide to do a couple steps, he's going to change that pity to awareness. And then awareness grows into friendship, and friendship eventually leads you to believing that everyone deserves a seat at the table, or at least will make space. Wow. And so I don't know. I think I never want to discourage people from, like, there are tons of folks who have come into our ministry with that attitude, but then it changes. Like, it just, like God does a thing, man. He does a thing. So, which is awesome.
Going to your question of what have we done to train volunteers, I started thinking one thing that we definitely need to do is helping change the mindset for our volunteers and just our church cultures, because I think I know from experience some churches have they approach it as a behavioral issue and try to treat it in that way. And so not thinking that, oh, this is just a behavior of a student that's acting out, but seeing it as someone who has certain needs that are not being met and is struggling to be able to communicate to you what they're actually needing. And so changing the mindset of, hey, this isn't just a behavior issue.
That's so good. So good.
And on a quick example, again, with my son, when he was younger, and I won't say what church, but we shared with his Sunday school teacher, hey, he's got a developmental delay. He's struggling socially. Can you just kind of keep an eye on him? And the Sunday school teacher, I guess, just did not hear what we as parents were saying. And he acted out a little bit in the class, and the way that, and this is horrible, the way that she decided to treat the situation, because he wasn't communicating well, and as a 2 or 3 year old needing to go to the bathroom, she locked him in the bathroom with the lights off to try to fix the problem. And that was not the solution there. We did our best as parents to say, hey, here's some things to see and understand in regards to how he may behave or how he may not communicate well with you, but just be aware of this. But the church and that volunteer wasn't trained and equipped for that moment, as well as the mindset just had not been shifted to understand, okay, this child has something that this child is trying to express things differently than what you may see or understand. So
I'm so glad you shared that. That was very hard to hear that story.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that your family experienced that. And I'm also sitting here thinking, I bet the ministry leader never imagined their Sunday school teacher would have ever done something like that. Yeah. And if anybody is listening and feeling convicted, like, oh my gosh, I have never had this conversation with my volunteers. Like, now is the time.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Like, before something like that happens to a kid and to a family, like, absolutely, we need to be having those conversations. Hands down. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I almost, though, wonder if we also look at from your perspective, Jeremey. It took a lot of courage and vulnerability to go to a new church and say, hey, like, my kid has a developmental delay. Like, it's vulnerable to do that to begin with, to share the needs, but then and we wonder why parents don't want to show up at our churches when they have kids who are neurodiverse or who, have special needs. Like, it's so hard. And when you get burned like that, or things happen that are horrible, they're not and imagine that started when they were 2 or 3 and now they're 13 or 14 and they're not going to show up at a church, or if they do, they're going to be guarded. So I think there's a responsibility there that I just,
and I was on staff. And so, as a parent, every parent wants their child to be able to thrive in whatever ministry setting that they're in and to experience things. It not only hurt my wife and I, but it really made us begin to think of, okay, should we even be working at this church? Because there seems to be a lack of value for even a staff kid in that moment. And so, understanding the weight of what parents are carrying and how hard it is definitely important.
Let's talk a little bit more about the partnering with the family and the parent or the caregiver, because I want to know how to do that better. Yeah. So, Jeremey, I want to ask you first. Yeah. What do you wish people understood about parenting a child with special needs? Yeah. Or what do you wish the church did or didn't do?
Yeah. I think one of the big things, kind of going back to the idea of behavior issues, churches and ministry leaders have to be very careful not to self-diagnose a student, whether it is due to behavior issues or even if you are a licensed therapist or whatever. Don't sit back and say, hey, I think your kid needs to be able to see someone on this. We've had that issue so many times as a family, to where someone has self-diagnosed our son, and then we have to come back and say, well, actually, yes, he does have an IEP. He is, in this stage here, but you don't have the right to step into that space. We haven't invited you into that, and we didn't ask for your opinion either. So just don't self-diagnose, but also just, I would say, one, the church has to begin to recognize that in the same way that our neurotypical students and their families, their parents are exhausted from being parents. Parents with students with special needs are exhausted. And I think one of the best things that we can begin to do is begin to figure out and rethink different ways to help give care to those parents. I know for me, one of the things that we did in our ministry was a fundraiser called Parents Night Out, where we had parents just drop off their kids. They got a date night. I never once thought about, what if we did this for our families with special needs and brought in some people who are trained to be able to work with them and not use it as a fundraiser, but just to say, hey, parents, we see that you need a break. You need time to breathe or just reconnect with each other. And so just thinking about those families and recognizing that those families are exhausted as well as all of our other families. And just be intentional about training and learning so that you create a safe space, an intentional space for all families to be included. Yeah.
Hey, Ashley from the Rethinking Youth Ministry Podcast here. We know what you do is not easy and it requires so much energy, time, and passion. That's why we do what we do at XP3 Middle School and XP3 High School. We love to create content so that you can focus on what only you can do, which is manage the relationships you've been entrusted with your students, your volunteers, the families. Whew, it requires a lot of energy, right? So what I would love to do is invite you to check out our free trial. You get 4 weeks of XP3 Middle School, 4 weeks of XP3 High School, and a curriculum guide to walk you through it, because it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of content. It could be overwhelming, but we want to make sure that we're creating stuff to work for your context. Don't forget, you're going to need to contextualize it. I hope it's helpful. We can't wait to hear how it's given you the margin you need to do what only you can do. Oh, and go to thinkorange.com/XP3 to begin your free trial. We love you. We're for you. We're cheering you on. We'll talk to you soon. It's really good. I am sitting here thinking about a scenario that I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been in, but I kind of feel a little bit convicted because you're like, who are you to judge and make a diagnosis yourself? But I'm like, I've been in a situation, so I'm curious what your thoughts would be on this. Is I've been in a situation where I had a student with special needs in my middle school ministry. And it was very clear that he needed extra support in order to thrive and connect with people. Yeah. But his parent would not admit or share information and I never felt like I could go up to the parent and be like, hey, what's wrong with your kid? You know what I mean? Like, who am I to do that? Yeah. And if you're not going to openly share it with me, because what I'm thinking is I would love to know, like, what accommodations does he have at school? Because we should figure out what help he gets at school and do the same thing here, because he already knows that system, or he knows that cue, and it will help him connect more. Yeah. But I never felt like I could have the conversation because they never openly shared it. Yeah. And so it always, and he was one of my volunteers, so he was there. He saw what was going on, but never acknowledged it. So it always made it awkward for me. Yeah. And I don't know, like, what a better way, I don't know, like, how I should have, Jess, I'm curious what you think too. Like, how should I have handled that? Because I just let it go. Like, I just...
Well, I think it comes with the relational equity. You know, you've got, and not that you didn't have the trust of that family, but you've got to earn that trust first. And a lot of times I think that parents will, once they feel like they can trust you enough, that they will come around and share themselves, and not feel tempted as the ministry leader to rush the process. I mean, if you think about it, parents with students with special needs, they already have so many added layers to different processes with their kids. There's different layers or additional layers in regards to registering for school. There's different layers for them with any events or whatever. And we don't think about that in our youth ministries. And in fact, most of the times when a parent comes with questions, whether they bring like a notebook full of questions, we become frustrated of, why do you have all these questions? And, do you not think I'm not doing my job well? Well, that parent's simply got a long process that they have to think through because of what they deal with every single day. And when you have gained the trust of that parent and they feel like they can just breathe with you, I think then that's when parents are more open to say, hey, we just want you to know that, my child has this IEP and this may be able to help. My wife, she's, I don't want to say she's just overly guarded, but for her, at least for her personally, our son's IEP is something that we are working with his teachers, and we are learning on our own with our family on how to best help him. Yeah. And so that's a very, very personal situation for our family. And if you are not a trusted member of the family, that's just not something that's just easily given away. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But I feel like the relational equity is a high point there.
Yeah.
Jess?
I think you're absolutely right. Like like it's the relationship. It's the earning the right to be a part of the story. And so that can start though, if you have an intake, if they do share on the front end, that can start then with questions that not only ask about need, but also ask about dreams. Because I think that's what I want to do with my families. I want to dream together. Like, I want to dream of what a better church looks like, a better community. So let's start there. Let's start earning the trust there. Let's earn the trust with visibility. Let's earn the trust with asking the right questions. Let's earn the trust by maybe doing some simple accommodations when you don't know a diagnosis. Like, can you do some things? Maybe it's, in a small group, you establish a turn-taking device. So maybe you have a Frisbee that whoever has the Frisbee, that's who gets to talk. And so that maybe helps, that doesn't take a diagnosis to put it in. That probably is effective for most of our middle schoolers, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, some of these things like, a diagnosis to kind of have some information is helpful. But I think you can work around some things and get creative. And maybe it makes the space better for everyone. I think that's the best part is like sometimes when we do accommodations, it's not just for our students with special needs, it's for everyone. And it just makes the space better. So I think that's tricky. But I think you're right. It's the relationship.
And I think the whole ministry of the church has to feel and look trustworthy, because if you have a special needs ministry at your church, it seems to be that core group that's doing things. But if your children's ministry, if your youth ministry, and other areas of your adult ministry are not invested in that special needs ministry, the families of those students are not going to fully trust you with their information, or even with their student. And so your whole church ministry has to embrace this. And so
I think that's a process for sure, though.
Like, what I love about this conversation so far is that budget hasn't come up one time yet. And I love that because it's easy to just think like, oh, I don't have the budget for that, or my church isn't big enough, or I don't have enough volunteers and I've got to go find them or like reproduce some kind of resources. And consistently what you have said has been, this is people work from families to parents to caregivers to volunteers to students, all the way down each to small groups. Every person is just worthy of that relationship.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I want to come back to something you said, Ash. In the beginning, you said you were rethinking like the role of worship and how to make sure we're embracing neurodiversity when it comes to worship in the youth ministry space. So I'm curious, like after some of this conversation, any additional questions you have? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it, Jess and Jeremey.
I mean, how many times do we come to church excited? And I, came from a worship leading experience. That's my introduction into ministry, was worship leading. And so everything is all about, we're going to hype them up. Let's get them hyped. Let's go all in for Jesus. Not thinking about some of the students who are probably suffering because of our excitement. I mean, we've best of intentions. It's never ill willing, but just what are some things that we can remember from not just worship, but our whole programming experience? Like, how can we rethink games? How can we rethink all of the things that bring to life that we're excited about? We spend a lot of time thinking and planning and strategizing programming. And just the fact that one thing that you said, we don't think about our neurodivergent students first. And so as a worship leader, as someone who cares about the arts and respects the arts, how can I think about these students first?
That's good.
Yeah. Any trends that you've noticed, like acoustic Sundays are amazing,
Yes. Yeah. I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't have a space, like I don't have a sensory room, or I don't have, I don't have those things. And that is true of our church. We don't necessarily have a sensory room, but we do have a sensory cart that can go wherever we need it to go, that can make a space accessible. And so that's what we've done. We have accessible spaces because we have an accessible cart. And I think I also, in terms of worship, I just want to encourage us not to ever water down worship for our friends, because they worship in a way that is beautiful and important, and it needs to be seen. And they don't deserve kids songs, especially I think sometimes that, I don't want to say that has been the default, but it's beautiful when they sing just worship songs. Like it is just, it's a great thing. Like, let's not water it down. They can handle it. Like they're able to manage that. And I'm talking maybe a little bit more in special needs space there, but just in general, like don't water things down for those guys. They get it more than we realize.
I love that. Good. And it brings up another question I have about just culturally, worship is expressed so differently from church to church. But are there any things that you've picked up along the way in your studies and just your fellowship with other cultural churches and how they embrace this topic as well?
Ooh, good question.
That's good. I mean, I think there are certainly churches who do inclusion better naturally. And so I think that is, that's not been my experience. We've had to work at it. But I think for sure that there are opportunities, there's opportunities to learn from other churches and what they're doing and how they include students. But I'm interested in what you guys think about that. 'Cause I feel like it's been a slog for us. Like it's been a real push to do this, and like every step feels kind of heavy. But maybe that's not necessarily the experience in some other.
I can only speak from my experience in the Black church, and just it's pretty normal for Black churches to feel like a big hug, like just come on. Yeah. And so I would say that it has, I think that we're really intentional. The churches I grew up in were very intentional about just making sure everyone felt seen and just that level of warmth and the invitation to know that you can connect. But I do think we misstepped by not taking that extra step to say, and we're here for life, and this is the process that we're going to actually plug you into, not just befriend you when we see you.
I love what you said there. We're here for life. And that's what we don't realize about a lot of our students who may be neurodivergent, is that they're going to be, if you can make it a space of belonging and community, a lot of them are going to be there for life. And so I want to encourage us as we think about what it looks like to make our spaces inclusive, that we cannot pull a bait and switch. That we have to be intentional about making sure after 21, when they graduate high school and everything else falls apart, that we don't fall apart. Because I think it's the 21 cliff that you think, I can be awesome in kids ministry. I can be awesome in youth group. But then what happens when they turn 21 and everyone else drops them and we drop them too? That's not fair.
No, it's not fair.
And it sucks. And so I think that's the challenge of but then I think also there's such opportunity there.
Yeah. I think for Ash, to answer your question just about things observed, I feel like as I've spent time in just other cultures, the way that students who have special needs are treated is vastly different. And I've been in cultures where if a student has special needs, they're hidden from everybody. They're hidden in the home. No one ever sees them. And that's hard to see. Or they're only kept with students who have special needs as well, kept away from society. And it's hard to see, and I think we as a church, capital C church, have a lot of room to grow and influence the greater conversation about what a God of all the ways brains work, what a God of everyone looks like and loves like. I think we just have a lot of work to do, and it starts with the people we've been entrusted with. And absolutely. It's 1% at a time. And I can imagine people listening to this conversation might be overwhelmed. And if you're sitting here thinking, wow, Jess, you are a hero and what you're doing is incredible. And I agree with that. And you might also be thinking man, I want to do something like that. I just don't have the time. Let me just say, Jess is bivocational. So she has a job outside of ministry in order to live. And so I'm if somebody who's bivocational is also doing the amount of ministry you're doing the hard ministry, the relational ministry, I feel like it's a challenge to every single one of us who has the honor of calling ministry our full-time job. And so let me ask this is what is one step if somebody's listening to this and they're like, okay, I have not done a good job of this. I have not made this the main plate. It's not even a side dish. It's still on the kitchen counter. I haven't even brought it to the table. What would you say is one thing that they can be thinking about?
So if by chance you don't have any students with special needs in your ministry right now, or they're in your community, they're not coming to your church, what I would encourage you to do is to be intentional about your service. That you need to let's start serving people with disabilities. Let's start becoming acclimated to that so that when people show up, we're not like, oh my gosh, hold the phone. Like, you can do that right now. You can do that on a Saturday. Like, go serve a day program. Go serve places where, people with disabilities hang out, Special Olympics, whatever that looks like. Like, get your students involved. And I think that's low-hanging fruit. Like, that's easy. I think if you have students in your ministry, start by encouraging them. Encourage their families. Write them a postcard and say, hey, like, your kid is great and we love them being here. Let's start. That's easy stuff, guys. Like, it's not rocket science by any stretch, but like, I think it's seeing the good versus the problem. And we've talked about that. Like, it's seeing that everyone deserves a seat at the table. And so you can encourage them. You can find purpose for them. You can maybe think about the ways that you do community. Think about maybe it's inviting them over to your group over to your house for dinner, knowing that they never get that chance. I don't know. I think there are simple steps that we can start doing.
I love that. And something that you put together to help youth ministries all around the world. Jess put together this packet. When I say a packet, it's like 24 pages. It's amazing. It's like a booklet. And it's just super practical steps that you can start taking. It's 1% changes that you can start making or training people on, or even thinking about like the intake forms that are in that packet. Like even the questions that you have listed of like, hey, when you have somebody new who comes to your ministry, ask everybody this question because it's going to help you better serve them. And like just reading through the packet, I'm like, man, like I wish I would have had something like this as a resource, because I would have been such a better co-laborer, like with families and students with special needs. And like, I just, not just students with special needs, but every student that I was entrusted with. And so I feel like that is an incredible resource. And Jess has been kind enough to offer to give it away free to whoever is listening. And so we'll drop that link in the show notes. Thank you so much, Jess. We need more resources like this. And hopefully this is the first of many. We need more conversations like this. I hope it's the first of many. Thank you all so much for your perspectives and your vulnerability. And let's keep talking about it. So if you're rethinking something in youth ministry, especially when it comes to our neurodiversity in youth ministry, we would love to hear about it. We'd love to rethink it with you. DM us or reach out. Make sure you're following Jess Berryhill on all social channels, because this woman is putting out some incredible resources that's going to change the kingdom forever. We love you. We'll see you next time.